Well, good morning. It's good to see all of your faces this morning here in the room, as well as those of you that are joining us on Facebook Live today. Thanks for being here. We've got a fun topic to tackle, and I think it's going to give us some good discussion and conversation, not only here while we're together, but maybe when we leave as well. Great Transitions has been around for a while. It was founded in 2013, and it's a system for working with older adults as their family and their families as their lifestyle and housing needs may change. You know, sometimes it can be 12 to 18 months or beyond before you decide to make a transition of some sort. We're going to talk about those various transitions in a few minutes. Or a life event or a health event can trigger a change more rapidly. And we're here to guide you through the entire process. We genuinely believe that helping and guiding older adults is our calling, and it's an honor and privilege to do so. That's just the way we do it here at Great Transitions. Now, our objective here today is to bring education to you. And every month we're bringing various topics: legal, financial, housing, medical, sometimes just a plain old fun topic as well, because we want to keep it interesting and we want to keep providing things that you find helpful. I do remind you that we're not here to sell you anything. Our educational partners are not here to sell you anything. We're just here to be a resource. But we always say we've got a challenge for you. Number one, do you have a plan? Number two, have you communicated that plan to the people that are in your sphere? That may be your children, family members, trusted advisors, your best friend, whomever that is. And the third part is, are you confident that they'll be able to carry out your plan for you, right? So keep those things in the back of your mind as we go forth and jump into our topic of navigating life spaces based on life stages, not age, right? Because age is just a number. Exactly, right? So we're going to really hammer home stages today. I think that's super important. Life spaces are not just about moving. I mean, as realtors, we move a lot of people. But there's so much more to it than that as we progress through the various stages of life. So it may for you simply involve modifying where you currently live or how you are currently living, right? And that could change as your stages change. We have to think a little bit differently about our life spaces as we are living longer. A lot of people say, well, I'm not going to live that long. How do you know? Right? I had a conversation with someone that said, well, we retired at age 62 because we knew our genes and we didn't think we'd live as long as we have, right? Medicine is advancing. Healthcare and wellness is advancing, and we're living longer. And at some level, we're always in transition. My late husband used to say there's no such thing as maintaining. You're either moving forward or you're moving backwards. And I feel that way about transitioning through the different stages of life. We're always in some aspect of transition. But because we don't know exactly where it's taking us, it's important that we gear up and get ready, right? And have a plan. So with that said, we're going to unfold 5 truths today that are relative to our life stage. I've got a slide that I want to bring up that's called a 5-quarter life framework. Can everybody see that? Am I blocking your view there, Armin? I'm not. It comes from this book called Stage Not Age. Now, I gotta be honest, this is a marketing book for people who are working with older adults. But there's some really good information in it. And Gladys, the math does not make sense. 5 quarters does not compute, right? But we look at these 5 quarters as starting, growing, renaissance, legacy, and extra. Because we are getting extra, right? More and more people are getting extra. And you'll also notice that there is some overlap in some of the years on here. What quarter you're in may look different. I have some clients that was on the verge of retiring from the company he had worked for many years. They lived in Indiana. They got referred to me by a mutual friend, and they wanted to move to Florida to enjoy their retirement years. They had preteen and young teen grandkids that loved Disney almost as much as the grandparents loved Disney. And so we looked for a home that would get them relatively close to the airport, or an easy drive to the airport, and close proximity to Disney. They settled on a new construction home in Claremont, in one of the new neighborhoods out there. Now, they were moving from a 100-year-old home in Indiana to a brand new construction home in Florida. So their home maintenance requirements went way down really fast. And they were looking forward to that because they wanted to live the lifestyle of being able to go to the parks whenever they wanted. They had season passes, or all year long passes, before they ever became residents. So I actually think they made money when they moved here because those passes are so expensive. And everything was set. The grandkids were coming in several times a year. They're doing Disney. She had more Disney purses than I've ever seen. They were just living their best life. And this is what they had planned to do for many years. And then their younger son got married. And his wife got pregnant. And there was a new baby on the way. And so they called me a few months ago after having lived in this house almost 5 years and said, you know, the grandkids are getting older that were coming to the parks, and they're not coming as much, but we got a new baby coming in Atlanta, so we need to move. Right? Their renaissance was different. And so they made a change. And they were super excited about it. So they've swapped their single family home with a pool and all that stuff, still relatively low maintenance, but now they're city dwellers in a townhouse in Atlanta. And they got lots of time to cuddle that little nugget, right? So they've been able to morph and switch and change. And so I want us to keep an open mind as we're talking through some of these things. There are triggers that will cause us to reevaluate our life space, right? For them, it was a new baby on the way. It could be widowhood. Many of us have experienced that, and that changes the way we think about the house. A diagnosis or some type of illness or disease. To be near family, right? All of those things become triggers. So we'll just keep that in mind as we go through. Part of the 5 quarters get broken down even further into the 18 stages of life. This is a pretty detailed slide. It sort of reflects the 5 quarters, but really it breaks it into 4. And I think you'll find that you identify with several of these. We're going to come back to this slide in a few minutes. So I want you to be thinking about where you may fall. And you may fall in multiple stages across multiple columns. We talk about how life spaces does not necessarily mean moving, but it could mean changing what our living arrangements look like. There's a really simple formula. The life stage that you're in, plus your desires, goals, and needs, whatever those may be, equals your life space. It's a simple formula, but it doesn't mean it's easy to come up with, right? Because there's a lot of emotion behind these decisions. There's a lot of finances behind these decisions. There's a lot of consultation behind these decisions. So as we unpack the 5 truths, we'll kind of talk about some of these things. So the first truth that I want to discuss with you is that our why determines our next where. Okay? A couple years ago, my son was in college, or had gone off to college, was getting ready to graduate. I had a 4-bedroom, 3-bath house with a pool. I was on the verge of being an empty nester. It was a lot to take care of. It was a 20-year-old home. All the things were happening. I opted to downsize, right, to a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house with an office, no pool, new construction. Easy to take care of. Made my life much simpler. And I'm grateful that I did that. That was my why at the time. When we are capable, we tend to enjoy finding or creating new living arrangements. It's fun. But when it is out of necessity, due to disability, due to functional decline, we tend to resist change. Does anybody here love change? We might want to think we do, but then the rubber meets the road and it gets really challenging. This book was one of the books I had to read when I was getting my certification as a senior housing professional. It's called Aging in the Right Place by Dr. Stephen Gallant, who's a PhD at University of Florida. Anybody? Go Gators? I don't know. Sean, yeah, I knew it. It's a paperback book and it's really heavy. And I don't know if you can see, probably not. The type is really small. There is a ton of research in here. A lot of data. And the title is Aging in the Right Place. But you know what? It does not tell you what the right place is. Because only you can decide that for you, right? It requires a lot of thought, and it's different for each one of us. We were having Downsizers Club at one of our communities recently, and we talked about this, the why. What is your why? And there was someone that said, well, I am tired of fixing anything at my house. It's hard to get people to come do a bid. It's hard to get them to show up on time to do the work. And let's be honest, there's usually 3 zeros attached to everything I have to have done at my house. Somebody else said, I sat down with my financial advisor, and based on my monthly expenses in my house, I could actually live cheaper month to month at a community, right? So there was a practical cost-saving aspect. We have another gentleman that we talked to recently that had a health diagnosis. That meant long-term there were going to be some things that he needed to deal with. And so he wanted to make the decision now, while he was healthy and could do it, as to where he was going to be going. So we think about all of those things, and I give you permission to sit in a quiet place, maybe with a piece of paper and a pen, and think about your why. Maybe that looks like having a conversation with a trusted advisor, a family member, me, one of our educational partners, right? But think about your why. Because when you can crystallize your why, that's going to make everything else much easier. We are all living longer, and so transitions are going to come. Do you guys remember Willard Scott on the Today Show?
Yes.
Yeah, the Smuckers, happy birthday to those centenarians, and how amazing it was that there would be, 2, 3, 4 people that turned 100 or thereabouts. Do you know that would be a whole show now? Because we have that many people turning 100. I did a little digging. Currently the oldest living person is in the UK. Her name is Ethel Caterham. She's 116. And she's living vibrantly for 116 years old. I read a book about 15 years ago, I've shared this with some of you, that there are people alive today that will live to be 120 to 150. When I read that 15 years ago, I was in my mid-40s, right? Low 40s. I'm like, really? But now, 15 years later, I'm like, yeah, I can totally see that happening, right? So things are definitely changing. So we've only unfolded one truth, but you've already got homework. What is your why? Right? That's what I want to leave you with today to ponder. Now, our next truth is something that's very common here in the United States, maybe not so much in other countries, but our home is our identity. We identify with that. I have a good friend in Uganda whom I visited, stayed in their home. When he came to the United States with his son to stay in my home, we were laughing about housing in the United States. He said, "You all even have houses for your cars," right? It's a big part of who we are. Where people live is closely identified to, or closely tied to their identity. When I'm working with a buyer that's looking to buy a home, they're telling me this is the neighborhood I want to live in. This is where I can see my children growing up. Or this is, we've got empty nesters that are looking in Baldwin Park because they want to be able to walk down to the restaurants or walk to Publix. We'll have a time for Q&A towards the end of the class. Think about your very first apartment or home. Why did you move into that apartment or home? Do you remember? Close to work? Yeah? Maybe you had a roommate that found it and it was a great location and all the fun things, different things like that. That was your identity at the time, right? Now, how many of you have been in your home 10 years or more? Keep your hand up if it's 20 years or more. Keep your hand up if it's 30 years or more. Okay, we've got a few, right? What made you move to that home 30 plus years ago? What was your identity around moving to that home 30 plus years ago? Was it your forever home? We called it our forever home. Was it
affordable?
It was affordable, okay. In a location that you wanted to be in. Did anybody have like family or kids that they wanted to raise in that home? Yeah? Is that still a factor in your identity today? Right. Our identities get cemented, and yet our needs change, right? So there's a rub there. We bought a house in Vero Beach many years ago when my son was 5. It was an amazing house on 1.25 acres. Had a big pool with a big lanai. He could play, we built a mound in the backyard and a batter's box in the backyard. He could do all the baseball things. It was a great house to raise a family in. It was wood frame in a beach town. Can I tell you it required a little maintenance? It did. It was almost 5,000 square feet. Was the maintenance expensive? Yes, it was. Does that suit my needs today when my son is out of my house and out of my checkbook? No, it doesn't, right? So, this is our third truth. Once we've established that identity, it sometimes gets cemented. And we don't want to waver from that. From the way we saw ourselves living at that time, right? Even if it means that it's at our own peril. If we require care, if our needs change, we've got to change with that. So I want to revisit those 18 stages of life. I want you to take a look at that. there are a few that I think you might be in across many stages. One of my favorites is continuous learning, right? We need to always be learning. Resetting life priorities. We're kind of constantly doing that. Many of you know I lost my father recently. My mother is in a season of grief, of course, but there's going to be some resetting of priorities in the months ahead for her. And that's going to be challenging. But we'll talk through it and we'll get through it, right? Transition is always happening. I think there's a big, and Sean and Dana, you can tell me, developing financial security in your portfolio. There's a lot of talk around that, and you may be jumping back and forth through that. I have someone we're getting ready to close on her house, and she's talking with her financial advisor about the proceeds from the house and how they're going to be invested. It's really important to her for long term. You may even find yourself in a whole column, especially that reinvention stages column, because there's a lot in there to think about, right? One thing is certain in life, and that is change, right? And we need to get ready for that. In 2024, some of you were here when Dr. Nikki Buckaloo came. We had a great seminar on the psychology of aging, and she said something we had not prepped for in our pre-seminar discussion. She said, there's no such thing as independent living. And I was like, what? Because our communities offer independent living, and I live independently, right? But we talked through that, and she's right. We start out being dependent, right? I think babies like change, but we don't like change, right? Or babies like to be changed, maybe. We're dependent on our family unit for food and shelter and clothing and all of that. We grow and we begin to gain some independence, maybe becoming interdependent on our family for the needs that we have, but we're able to feed ourselves, brush our teeth, go to school, do all those things. We still rely on the family to provide a lot of stuff for us. And as we age, we develop this illusion of independence. You know, when my son went away to college, his freshman semester, he was at FIU down in Miami, and we got, I think it was Hurricane Matthew. His name is Matthew, that's how I remember that. And so they evacuated FIU, and he came home. He had been away from home for about 4 to 6 weeks. Do you know he knew everything when he came back? He was so smart. He had just learned everything about life. But he still needed me to pay for his meal plan. Right? And all the things. So that illusion of independence. We talked a little bit earlier about your first apartment or your first house that you purchased. And that does feel like being independent until the kitchen faucet breaks and you have to go to Home Depot or Lowe's, and you become very dependent on the people there to help you make those repairs, right? We progress through life in this state of interdependence until at some point we do become dependent. I watched that in my dad's life in the last several months of his life when he became dependent on my mother, who was his caregiver. And that was hard. But we move through these stages, and it's not about age, right? This could happen in your early 60s. There could be a health crisis that causes you to become totally dependent on someone, or maybe even dependent for a season based on a rehab situation or something, right? We hear stories of plenty of octogenarians and whatever 90-year-olds are called that are still running marathons and lifting heavy weights and doing all those things, right? So it's a stage and not an age. We need to plan accordingly. I have a friend who lives in another state. She and her husband downsized to a condo. They had a house. downsized to a condo. She's a little bit younger than me, but the kids are grown and gone, and they're living their best life in their condo. She was telling me that there were a couple of people that had moved into the complex recently, 2 different people, had moved out, much older than her, had moved out of their homes, their single-family homes. They had dementia, and they were now living in a condo. Who's taking care of those people? Right? The neighbors are like, oh, because they're not skilled at taking care of people. And she was unsure of the reasons. It could have been a financial reason that the decision was made. It could have been that the person was absolutely not moving to a memory care community. There could have been any number of things. But still, it was a plan. It probably wasn't the right plan, though, for those people, right? And so those are the kind of things we want to think about. We want our decisions to make sense so that we're in the right place. And it's super important that we become proactive rather than reactive with our decisions, right? So that might look like, I'm not moving out of my house right now. I'm perfectly fine. But maybe I need to make some modifications. We have a client that she renovated her condo probably 8 or 10 years ago. But part of that renovation, she was still very active, was to widen the doors. So if she needed a knee replacement, was on a scooter or whatever, she knew she could get in and out of the doorways. She added some grab bars in the shower, just in case, right? There were some things that she did to make the home more accessible so that she could live in there much longer, right? I even noticed that last year when I had foot surgery and I was on my knee scooter in my newer construction home. It was way easier for me to get around, and I thought back to my previous house, and I'm like, ugh, that would have been tough, right? For some of you, it may look like I'm living in a 2-story house, and I got to have hip replacement or knee replacement or something in my future, and I'm going to need to convalesce on the first floor. Do I have a bedroom that I can use? Can I turn a room into a bedroom temporarily for that time? Those are the sorts of things that we want to think about and be proactive in our decision making. My husband died of a heart attack at age 47. But about a month before he died, we had a conversation that looked sort of like this. We were talking about our life insurance policies because they were coming up for renewal, and we were making some changes to the policies because his job had changed in the time that we had purchased that. My job had changed a little bit, so we were making some adjustments. And he said, listen, if something happens to me, you need to do this, 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 and this. Like, yeah, whatever. And he said, if something happens to you, I'm going to do this, 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 and this. I'm going to need to do these things. And I'm like, okay, sure, right? Well, on November 18th, that conversation came back to me a month later. And while I was struck by the tragedy, I knew about these certain things, what I had to do, right? Because we had had the conversation, and it made it easy. It made that horrible thing a little bit easier. So while it's uncomfortable to talk about what am I going to do with this, or what am I going to do if that happens, what am I going to do if I get this diagnosis or that diagnosis, what are my plans? Alexis, who was here with Vitas, she and I had those conversations recently as my dad was progressing through his life. And it was super helpful to me to be able to have someone to just get some information from, right? And say, what if? Because we don't know. One thing is certain, things are going to change, but we don't know when or how or to the degree at which they're going to change, right? Has anybody ever something happened to you out of the blue, kind of blindside you? Every one of us, right? And so that's why we want to be ready, not only for the stage we're in now, but for the stage or stages that are coming for each of us, right? We know they're coming, and we want to be ready for that. Our fourth truth talks about the demographic trends, and how that's making planning ahead more important than ever. I'm assuming we have some baby boomers here. Just a few baby boomers. What do you know about the baby boomers as far as it pertains to the size of the baby boomer group? It's huge, right? Whatever those parents were doing, it worked, right? There's a lot of you. And it's a long range of time, right? I don't have the whole years. We have a few silent generation people still around, certainly, and some greatest generation people still around, certainly. But the bulk are baby boomers and the older Gen Xers that are moving through all of those stages, right? But what we need is a support system. Now, many of us are completely independent, and I can make my own decisions, and I'm good, right? I have a good friend, a coach, a mentor in my organization that says your greatest superpower is the ability to ask for help, right? Whatever that looks like. You may not take the advice, but getting the information is super helpful. So regular social interactions with other people are super important. Community support reduces stress and anxiety. I watched as my mother was giving care to my dad, and as we brought people in to help through Vitas, actually, my mother took a breath. Not completely, but a little bit, right? And that community support was so helpful for her, even if it was small, right? So we need it, and we usually need it before we think we need it. We get past it sometimes. Learning opportunities improve cognitive function. That's why y'all are in the room. It's probably the smartest people in Winter Park right here, because you came here to learn. And I will also say that it may mean finding some new people. Because you may have some people in your life that say, "What? Are you crazy? Why would you ever move out of that house? Or why would you want to stay in that house?" Right? You may get both sides of that. And so you may need some new people to help you with some of the decisions, because there again, we're in a different stage. We talked about being proactive. And I want to talk about Bob and Leanne for just a second, who come to our seminars. You guys have been coming for a while, but you guys were proactive. I know when we first visited, you had a beautiful home. It was very well kept and cared for and maintained. You had a 3-car garage, 2 cars, doing all the things, but you opted to move to a community. And maybe you were ready, maybe you weren't ready. But you were proactive. And I remember the discussion that we had, because I was asking, where in the community were you moving? Because a lot of people, if they've been in a single family home, they want to be in a villa, right? Because they've been in this home, how could they ever downsize to an apartment? Or I had an apartment 50 years ago, I'm not going back to an apartment, or whatever. And you guys said, no, we want to be in an apartment, in the main building, where everything's happening, because we want to make friends there. Because that's going to be our community, right? And so I'm proud of you guys. And I thank you that we got to help you and have a front row seat as we watched you take those steps, difficult as they may be. So for some of you, Bob and Leanne may be your people, because they can tell you how it went for them, right? How many of you have a plan. Love that. I love that you have a plan. How many of you have a plan B? Couple, right? And a plan C? Very few of us, right? Those are just as important because things change, right? Family situations change. Neighborhoods change. Life changes, right? And so having a plan doesn't mean you need to execute the plan, but you have it when you need it. Having a plan doesn't mean that you can't change the plan because your situation may change, right? So just keep that in mind. And especially as it pertains to exploring other living options for you, this brings us to our fifth truth. There are living options now available that weren't available to previous generations. My dad always said, don't put me in one of those places. You know what those places are like, right? Maybe you had a grandparent or a parent in one of those places. I promise you, the communities that are in this room that are our educational partners, they ain't those places. I would actually like to move there now. We talked about the size of the boomers and Gen Xers that followed behind them. A lot of what is happening in senior living communities are designed to appeal to that group of the population. We had a panelist a couple years ago that talked about moving to a community, and most people say, I would say 99.5% of the people we talk to say, I want to move at some point, but I'm not ready yet, right? And this person that was on our panel said, better 5 years too early than 1 day too late, right? For a number of reasons, whether it's a continuing care community or a rental community. If you're not able to enjoy the lifestyle, then it makes the decision a little bit harder. But a lot of our communities, they're adding some amazing lifestyle options that are being very appealing, especially to the younger boomers, the middle boomers, even the older boomers. Dining options that are off the chain, delicious, right? Amazing. Private label wines, things of that nature, and activities around those. Pickleball, I gotta tell you, pickleball is big, and we're seeing that coming into a lot of the communities. Things like taking trips to Magical Dining and Dr. Phillips and all the things that you may already be doing now. It's just a little bit easier because you have a driver. We had a conversation out there earlier. I want a driver. I would love to have a driver to drive me around to all the things if I didn't have to do that, right? There is an opportunity there. But what we see happening on the horizon 10, 15 years down the road is, are there going to be enough options? Whether it's moving to a community, is there going to be space for you? Because people are living longer, right? And taking up space. Or maybe you're staying in your home. Are there going to be enough caregivers to come in? Right? So these are all things that we want to think about. So with that said, we came up with 5 questions for you to ponder as you think about these things. And we'll email these out to you, or you can scramble to write them down on your seminar notes page. But I do want to go through them and talk about them a little bit. What stage of life am I in now? That requires some honest reflection, whatever it is. One of my mentors actually challenged me, how many different hats do you wear? And I began to list those out, right? That tells you a little bit about what stage you're in also. Am I transitioning to a new stage currently, or might I expect to do so in the near future? Maybe you've got some health issues going on, and there may be some transition happening. Maybe you've got some family stuff going on, and that could bring some transition, right? So those are the things you want to think about. Number 2, is it time to reevaluate my desires, goals, needs, and priorities for this stage of life, or possibly the next stage if I'm in transition? Goals are great. Plans are great. And what's also great is you can change them anytime you want. Just change the goal. It can look different. Well, I wasn't planning to move until I got to be X age. Who said that, right? You can change that at any time you want. You know, maybe a friend moved into town, or a new grandbaby is born, or any of those things, right? Don't be afraid to make a tweak or flip the script in your plan. Number 3, does my current space and place make the most sense for my current stage and or my next stage? And if it doesn't, what do I need to do to make it make sense? Or what do I need to change so that I'm in a place where it fits better, right? Just things to consider. Number 4, am I able to objectively evaluate and assess my life stage and whether my stage and place makes sense? Or do I need some help in doing so? And what did we say our greatest superpower is? Ability to ask for help, right? And it may mean you're spot on. You just need somebody to echo that back to you. I have a really good friend that I call and I say, I need a wife. And she says, what's going on? And I lay it all out to her because I need that feedback, right? And we share the same values. She gives me straight talk. I value it immensely. So then I ask you, number 5, who in my life currently can I have an honest conversation with about my space and place-related goals, needs, desires, and priorities? Right? Who do you need to talk to? Who can speak the truth in love to you and you hear them? Who will you listen to even though you might not like what they have to say? Right? Right? And I don't want you to take this as preachy in any way, shape, or form. And I don't think you will. Because you're here because you're a planner. And you're a thinker. And you're a learner. Right? And we need your help in spreading this message and changing the narrative about getting older. That it's not aging, it's maybe maturing or maybe not maturing at all, right? It's just moving through these stages and how that looks different. We're going to be around for a long time, and we want to be living vibrant, robust lives. And we're just super grateful, and I think I know I speak on behalf of the educational partners, that we get to be on the journey with you, walking through this. And so we encourage you to ask questions, to raise your hand, to make a call, to mark on your blue form that you need to talk to somebody, because you'll get some honest information and feedback. I talked to a lady recently who was making some decisions and they just weren't working out well for her. She had another realtor. She had a financial advisor. She had all the attorneys in place. But it just wasn't working out. And I said, listen, call me. We'll talk through it. I'll ask some pointed questions that you can ask them. It's about helping one another along the journey. So we're grateful that you're here. And I don't know if I can answer your questions, but if you have any questions about this whole stage and age and place and all these things, I'm happy to answer any questions about anything. I might defer to an educational partner. So we've got some microphones. Somebody has a microphone in their hand?
So I can just ask asking right now, how soon could I get that thing you just had up there?
Linda wants a copy of our questions to ponder. Okay. You know, it takes us a couple weeks to render the video, but I think we might be able to send that out maybe even this week to you guys. Because I want it, while it's fresh on your mind, I'd like to get that in your hand. Would that be helpful to everybody?
Yes.
Nicole, can we get that done? Okay. I want to make sure I don't overpromise and we underdeliver. Cheryl? Yeah.
If you don't mind, and they don't mind, there's probably more than just myself would like to ask the question to Bob and Leanne, why they picked where they're living now, what their reasoning was.
Okay.
Because we are going through the picking process or weeding out places.
So I'm
And
gonna,
I just
if it's all right, I'd like to give you a moment to think about that, how you came down to your decision. Would you mind sharing that with us in just a second? Yeah, maybe. I will say that you've noticed on your blue form, we're doing our fall community tours. Some of you have already toured these communities. I encourage you to come again. Cheryl, I'm going to point you guys out. You've toured several communities several different times. You've shared with me that you learn something different every time you go.
Every time.
Knowledge is power, and I think it's super important that you get to know these communities, what they have to offer, to decide if it's a right fit for you. Gladys, you'll tell me you don't want somebody moving in if the community doesn't fit what they need, right? Yeah, 100%. That's a great way to begin the process. And I think, Cheryl, we've talked about this too, that there are times where you could weed out certain things that you know you don't want to do. Maybe it's, I know I don't want to stay in this house forever. Or maybe I want to stay here for X amount of time and then move somewhere. I had a couple that was trying to decide, do I move to be near family? Or do I move to be near my doctors and my friends and the things that I'm doing now, right? Because a lot of families are more spread out. So those are a couple of different things that you want to consider as you're narrowing down your choices. I'm going to see if you got something you can enlighten us with. Okay, all right. Gladys will bring the microphone over to you.
Here, you can go ahead and grab it.
I think for us, we took a long time, and it was about a 3-year process for us. The things that drew us were, number one, the overall ambiance of the places that we looked at, the attitudes and the friendliness of the people.
The kids would say the vibe.
I'm no kid, but that sounds good. And I think that for us, we like the idea of not having to navigate a lot of space to get to activities and places that we want. The weather's unpredictable. Didn't want to necessarily have to walk outside for 500 feet to go to dinner or something
Gotcha.
like that.
Okay.
But overall, I think it was the attitude and the helpfulness of the people and the comfort level that we felt. And we viewed 7 communities, so
Okay.
it wasn't, and we kept going back. And finally, we decided where are we most comfortable based on what our expectations were. So that's what we looked at. I think you have to just know what you feel when you go to an environment. And while no environment, not even your own home, is going to be perfect, I think that the comfort level that you feel probably was the most important for us. That we just knew, okay, amenities are overall pretty much the same. They're different, but the same. You know, the food is probably overall different, but pretty much the same. But it's what you feel. Could you really see yourself living there? And how how comfortable you feel.
It goes back to that identity question, right? Can I see myself living in this neighborhood? And you've been doing that your whole life. So you just come back to revisit that. Thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate that. And I'm sure everybody in the room does. Catherine has a question to your right, Gladys.
Thank you. We are in a changing real estate market.
Mm.
And, you know, you're on top of that all the time. How much should that affect these kinds of decisions that we're making? Because, you know, when we sell our house, it's gonna make a big difference
Sure,
in terms of how much money we're gonna have to make this big transition.
sure. That's a great question, Catherine. How does the real estate market affect this? Because for many of us, myself included, when it's time for me to go to a community, I've got that nest egg. We live in our biggest asset, right? For most of us. The market is the market. And we're not in 2021 or 2022 anymore. Your house is probably not worth over $1 million today, where we could have gotten that a few years ago, right? It was like, I would have meetings and it's like, what do you want to sell your house for? Well, I think it's worth this much. Okay, great. And we got 40 offers. We're not there, right? Interest rates are a little bit higher. Buyers are taking their time, so it's taking a little bit longer for houses to sell. Prices are softening, I will tell you. The numbers are here, but the market's behaving here, is what I see happening a lot. And it's very localized, right? It kind of depends on where you're at specifically. And we take a hyper-local view when we're looking at that. But I think that's where your all-star team of advisors comes into play, because that's one thing that you want to consider. Talking with your financial person in conjunction with that to go through the exercises to see what the long-term implications are. Sean and Dana are great at sitting and running extrapolations of what that portfolio of all of your assets together can look like over time. That's super important, right? And then as you make the decision as to where to go, you have options. Do you go to a community that may require a buy-in, but yet there's an option if you outlive your money to help you to be able to stay there? Or do you protect your nest egg and go to a rental type community? And those are things that you need to kind of balance out. The real estate market will play a role, certainly, in that. But I think it's a piece of the puzzle, and not the most important piece, but certainly a big piece. And so we talk about it. You know, my favorite answer is it depends, right? Case by case basis. We have a client that is downsizing, and they not only had a first mortgage, they had a second mortgage, right? So that made a difference in their plans, right? So there are just little things and nuances like that. We've got another client that has a roof, an air conditioner, and a water heater that are all almost 30 years old. So there's going to be some impact to get that house ready to go on the market, right? Because nobody can get insurance on that house unless you want to sell it to an investor at this price. So different things that we consider as we look at each individual unit. And I will say, it's a house. People are still changing jobs. They're still getting married. They're still getting divorced. They're still having babies. People are dying. Life is still happening, and people will need a place to live. Right? Yeah. So, thank you for asking. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Could you share, if you can, what the topic will be for October?
Oh, our October topic? We're going to, thanks for asking that. We're going to be talking to people who downsized and lived to tell about it. It is close to Halloween, yes. We encourage you to come in costume. No, I'm just kidding. But if you want to come in costume, that's okay. Yeah, and you can indicate that you'd like to come on the blue form. We'll take those. Any other questions before we wrap up? Okay, well, thank you all for being here. We are excited about next month. I want to make sure I've got everything I need here. I'm missing a page. Okay. Oh, here it is. All right. Did we try and sell you anything, Carl?
I'm supporting your speech.
Well, thank
You
you.
did it very well.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. We do encourage you to bring someone that's never come before next month. And maybe we'll have a couple people in the raffle. And you too can walk away with a $50 gift card. We will, the blue forms, you can give them to me or to Nicole, any of our educational partners. We do go over those. We value them. It's feedback. If there's something that you have a question about, jot it on there, and we will do our best to address it in a seminar, find an answer for you, or whatever we have to do to get that question answered. And then we always like to leave you with a closing quote. Never underestimate the power that you have to take your life in a new direction or into a new stage. All right. Thanks so much for coming. You guys have a great day.